Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here again today. I'm your host, Isabeau Solace. My co-host is Emma Jenkinson. Today, we are going to discuss our personal experiences with positive reinforcement training. When we started learning it, how our ideas about positive reinforcement have changed over time and how the conversation around the whole idea of positive and negative reinforcement have changed over the past couple of decades. During the podcast, I referenced people whose names I couldn't completely remember. One is Dr. Susan Friedman. Her website is behaviorworks.org. She is a frequent guest and on many, many podcasts and has produced a ton of work. So check out the show notes if you want to link directly to her website, or you can just look up Dr. Susan Friedman on YouTube and you will find a ton of videos. Also, we discuss Shauna Koresh Equine. She does a podcast series on equine clicker training, which is excellent. So check that out also. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy. I thought we could talk about our experience and our history with positive reinforcement training, how we learned about it, how our ideas about it have changed over time, and that kind of stuff. I suspect you have more experience than me. I'm more of a dabbler. I've been practicing with horses and kind of letting the horses teach me. I come to it after having had a more structured education in round pen, natural horsemanship, negative reinforcement type of stuff. I had worked for a breeding farm back in the age when you could get a 12 box of John Lyons VHS tapes back at the beginning of the internet in about 2000. And they were very interested. They wanted their horses trained this way, and I never learned it. And I lucked out that guy was very intent on teaching us. And so he spent hours and hours, and he was very intent that no matter how thick we were, that we were going to learn. And then the internet came out, and I started learning more about the positive reinforcement stuff, which in the past 20 years has gone through its own learning cycle as it's interacted with the free market. But I don't teach people. And one of the trickiest things I discovered about the positive reinforcement early in was that it wasn't a shortcut. It wasn't a way around. And as a matter of fact, there may even be more requirements for the person to have discipline than with the negative reinforcement. It's even trickier.
Timing is critical, and there's a lot of moving parts.
There's timing is critical, and there's a lot of moving parts. And, since I started learning about it online, it seems like it's only become more complicated and not less.
Yeah. When would you say you first heard about it?
That's a good question. I'm going to try to remember. I first started practicing it in probably 2018. I probably heard about it first in like 2014-ish. I had one clinician I used to work with a lot, and she tried to explain it to me one day as just after the clinic when we were, hanging out with the horses in the barn. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. But she tried to kind of explain it really quickly. It's so much easier now that there's so much stuff online. I mean, it can be more complicated when you don't know stuff because there's tons of information around and you get overwhelmed with who to pick and who to talk to and what program to sign up for. And people are now, there's a whole group of people who are specifically anti-positive reinforcement. They're like, you don't have to use treats to get your horse to stay with you. They're anti-treat and they're anti-positive reinforcement almost. And then there's a group of people who are relationship first. So definitely complicated. I still have not signed up for an actual structured course though. So I need to sign up for a 3-month or so. Alexandra Kurland does really good clinics and stuff. I'm going to sign up and do at some point. I find it tremendously useful, especially for horses that are really scared. Like you can make really fast progress, especially with horses who are either afraid or with horses who've had people be either aggressive or just confusing. Like a lot of times it isn't even so much the pressure, because pressure is a natural thing. It's more just the how to make sense, how to break it down into those intermittent steps. And then horses get confused. And feeding them with treats can definitely help. But what I think I've figured out at this point is with either positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, one big problem is when we try to use it for persuasion instead of communication. It's easy. You can make that mistake with positive reinforcement too. Trying to use it to persuade a horse, the horse understands I want them to do this. They do not want to do this.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
I
I
guess
get it.
hopefully we all have the goal of keeping the horse under a threshold so they're in a learning headspace,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And you can accidentally push them over with positive or negative reinforcement.
Yes, and that's definitely one of the tricky parts. So just this past year, my new employers, I've been able to help them with trailer loading, which with a bunch of the with the horses. But we have one horse. He's like, I know you want me to get on, and you don't have to be aggressive with the stick or anything. You just have to take out the stick and show him the stick, and he says, "Okay, I'll get on the truck." But if you just stand there, like he'll get on for me, but for other people, he'll be like, no, I don't really want to. And he'll get them, they'll get stuck at the door and he'll just be like, no, give me a treat. Or he'll take a step on and then back off and then want. He starts to run the show. And then he's still really scared of the wash stall. Like the wash stall is a very scary space for him. And we've been feeding him in there and he's comfortable getting his breakfast and his dinner in there. But it's really dodgy if you want to do anything like make any kind of noise. Use the
Yeah,
hose.
he's still not his favorite place and he's still on edge.
Yes. He's still very tense and he's got he looks out for himself. I don't hold it against him. He's a smart guy. He wants to make sure that he's going to stay safe. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
I definitely gleaned a lot from the internet. I took a
Yeah.
lot of Shauna Crash's free online clinics and seminars, and she had those for quite a long time. She's just set up a new program, which I know is awesome. But there was a lot of free stuff from her out. I would say I've been practicing for 4 years and I started hearing about it maybe a year before, as far as with horses. Like I knew about it with dogs, but I also never had any success training dogs and I really didn't understand the predator thing. I just always had trouble like with my dogs and I didn't try positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement training with my dogs. I was like, I'm a horse trainer and I don't know what to do with that. But yeah, I would say Shauna Karash was one of the first people that I saw 5 years ago, and I started listening to her podcast, which really takes you step by step through lessons. It was like Clicker Training 101, Equine Clicker Training 101 or something like that. I don't know if it's still up, but that was like, I literally just went through the podcast with my horses and did the positive reinforcement. I also had started to see it used a lot with wild Mustangs. And that year was the first year that I ended up gentling a wild Mustang for the first time. And I decided to use positive reinforcement. And so really it was getting the step-by-step information of how to start and then just experimenting really. But I really struggled for years about whether I had done enough or experimented enough to know what I was talking about. Like I didn't start saying I did positive reinforcement or using it in practice with clients until I think I met you. And we did that first podcast on putting the horse first. I think that was my coming out for sure. So right after that, I started getting some clients. And so this past really summer, I got to experiment with a lot of different kinds of horses. And I would say I have struggled a lot, though, with deciding how much I want to use it and all these existential questions that come up about consent and what punishment is in positive or negative reinforcement and how much I'm willing to ask my clients to change when they have things that are working for them. So really what I like to at least practice is that I'm not going to do anything with someone else's horses that I haven't done with my horses, and they hopefully have similar circumstances. And there have been times that I've had to reach out to certified behavior consultants with 20 years of experience, if not with questions, but also with cases and referring people to them as well. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I'm still questioning that to this day. Like yesterday, I went out and I decided to not use treats and just see what the horses wanted to do with me. And I started walking around in circles, and they kind of started following me and getting in line. And I noticed my gelding, I can just feel it behind me that he's pinning his ears. And this
Ah,
is like a behavior that I question a lot with clients and with my horse, which is like getting frustrated following a target or a person. And especially because we use treats in most of our sessions, he's probably like, when am I going to get paid? When are you going to click? But I could just feel him like getting frustrated. Lo and behold, I turn around and his ears are like completely pinned back. He's got a lot of tension and crinkle in his eyes. And I know with him that can lead to him biting you real hard in the back. He's had a recurring problem with that for years, and he actually hasn't even tried to bite anyone in over a year. And I accredit it very much to positive reinforcement training with the clicker, but it was training to get some patience from him. Really. He
gotcha.
has a limit still, and I can't push it, and he's still not in lessons, and I'm very careful with him interacting with other people because he really has hurt other people, or he could, and he has hurt my miniature pony. He also really doesn't like her.
Yes, gotcha.
So,
All right.
he just has some behaviors that I know can escalate to violence, and I wanted to see what would happen in a session without any positive reinforcement and with another horse, because that's difficult for him as well. And he really just seems to not be sure how to interact and not sure what the outcome's going to be. And then I was holding a dressage whip, and it was down by my side. It's maybe something for them to follow or just have there. And they all started following me around, and he's getting frustrated. So I would just stop. And like, this is really how I stopped his biting behavior, is every time he would come at me with that energy or that force of like pushing his face into my space, I would turn around and I would pet him gently, and I would not push back, but I would choose to like turn around and stop everything and acknowledge what's happening until I see some sort of change in him, and then we would go back to what we're doing. So it wasn't the treats that fixed it. It was acknowledging that behavior and not
Gotcha.
putting him
Interesting.
in a position to fight back as well. And
Yes.
really, then he learns how to interact with us. And I saw that. I also saw that then I went and I gave them some food, and I went and pet my mare with the whip, and she's very comfortable with that. She gives maybe a little side eye to it, but I touch my gelding with the same whip, and he knows it's coming, and I warn him and everything. All the skin on his entire body twitches, right? And his whole body tenses up. He keeps eating, but like, it's a very different reaction to my mare with the same tool or object. And so I know at this point I can't use it for anything
Gotcha.
until
Yes.
he is comfortable with it. So
Yep.
next time I'm going to take the whip out and see how it goes, but I'm actually very much focused on interacting with them without positive reinforcement with treats and without negative reinforcement, to just see how they want to interact with me and where we're at.
Yes. No, I see a lot of positive reinforcement people after so many years are coming around to realize, I mean, the positive reinforcement, the early enthusiasts fell in exactly the same hole that the negative reinforcement natural horsemanship people fell in, which was this idea, oh, with this tool, I just have to use the tool the right way, and I can do everything. Like I can get anything done. There should be nothing I can't do. I just have to use this tool right. And then negative reinforcement people thought the same thing. They were also wrong. That unfortunately it is still just a tool, and we still cannot necessarily get. We're still not necessarily going to understand why. We're not going to necessarily be able to understand why The one horse doesn't want to go in the wash stall, or your one horse. I have had horses who I swear, yes, they understand. They know, even though I'm using positive reinforcement, they know it's transactional, and they resent that I'm trying to manipulate their behavior. They're not dumb. They're like, I know you just want to treat me like a puppet, and they're like, I'm not down with that. Alexandra Kurland has a really good podcast episode where she talks about how if two people and a dog and a bee were all in the same room, they would still not be in the same environment. The dog is going to smell and hear things that the people are not going to smell and hear. The bee is going to see things. So, you never know that horse. You don't really know what they're experiencing. You don't really know what they're feeling. You certainly don't know the entirety of their background, what their perception of their whole history is. So yes, but I still do encounter positive reinforcement people who are very certain about the fact that this notion of virtue that they've assigned to the positive reinforcement training, that is the highest, the holiest, the force-free, most pure, only kind way to train animals. They really put this crown on it. This is the only ethical, moral thing that you can do way to train animals. I think that doesn't help in the long run. It makes a lot of other people, like I recently started following some trick and liberty training groups. And the conflict in there between the pressure release and the positive reinforcement people is pretty ferocious.
Oh, yes.
And it's quite ferocious. And the opinion that some of the people in positive reinforcement have about the only ethical way to train animals is positive reinforcement, it doesn't help when they try to talk to people who do things other ways. The other people are automatically very, very defensive. If the narrative is, well, the only way to train animals is this R+ way, and everything else is just not okay. It's not ethical. It's not fair. I see people more and more realizing that they really can't just do. I mean, I have horses who get so overstimulated by any kind of, and even if you don't use treats, like I've had horses who I've tried to use scratches, they're still so overstimulated by that like I couldn't do it.
Yes.
Because they were very
not overstimulating a foal with anything.
Yes, yes, thank you. Yes.
And they put the whole world in their mouth, and they have no boundaries, no social skills, and they have very short attention span.
Yes, and they're babies, and it's normal for them to climb on things and punch things. Like this is normal baby behavior, climb up on object and punch it in the face. That's what they do when they're 48 hours old. Yes, positive reinforcement can definitely be a way of communicating with them for sure. I think it's back to what I was saying in the beginning about the persuasion part. It's hard for me to come to terms with the fact that I've got this one horse, and an ideal session for him is about 2.5 minutes. And beyond that, and he will walk away from me in the ring. He'll turn around and he'll walk away, and I'll just stop and breathe. It's just too stressful for him. And I'm just giving him treats, but he experiences it as very stressful for me to keep asking him to do things and keep treating him. He's got a short span where he can put up with that. And that's tough as a human, where we want to do stuff and we want to prove that we can do stuff, and we want to prove we're
or we
capable.
Need to, we need to move that horse. We need to get the farrier out before a snowstorm and this and that. There's instances where, for instance, recently my vet came, and I'm all for positive reinforcement and positive experiences for my horses. And so is my vet, who works with zoo animals. Like, she's very familiar with this stuff, but we really needed to look at a summer sore in my mare's mouth, and she's had these recurring. She hates anything done to her mouth. She knows what we're about to look at. She is out of there, man. Like, I had to just physically manhandle her to get that looked at. And, he forgave me after. I don't know if Disco would. So we really have to be discerning about what we do. But, there's reasons we can't be all consent and force-free all the time in every instance, because we have to keep them alive also.
Yes. Well, there's a woman who shows up, does a lot of guest appearances on podcasts, Her name is Susan something, and I can't remember her last name. I'm gonna have to
Okay.
look this up. But she's on a lot of podcasts. She's a great speaker. She's been doing this kind of stuff for decades and decades. And I listened to her on a podcast one day, and she's like, I don't have all my animals positive reinforcement trained. She's like, I have two parrots, and one of them I was able to train him to do his nails. The other one, when we have to do his nails, I wrap him up in a towel. She's like, it might be possible to positive reinforcement train this parrot, but I don't have another lifetime that it would take,
Mm-hmm.
because he's very sensitive. She said, we're very gentle, but we wrap up the parrot in a towel. And I was like, oh, so that was one of the first people that I heard who I know is pretty high up in the food chain and is a guest on tons of podcasts. A lot of other people respect and they invoke her name all of the time. And she was like, I wrapped one of my parrots up in a towel to do his name. I was like, oh, okay, ding, 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 ding. Gotcha. And that's something that a lot of people, and I think it partially just marketplace pressure. There's people out there trying to sell an agenda or sell something or insist that in our program we only do these things this way. And they don't want there to be any opportunities for people to not follow the plan. So they won't talk about any times when you can't follow the plan. So how were you? The last time I talked to you, you were running off to the ER, right?
Yes, I'm gonna have to wear a heart monitor for a week. I guess it just got here.
Okay.
And I've got some abnormal EKG, whatever, they're doing more tests, but I saw a cardiologist and like I'm not having a heart attack. I'm fine. I
Okay.
just to check my blood pressure, but basically I have really bad POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. All of a sudden
Mm.
it's just gotten like way worse. Um and so my heart rate goes all over the place and um it's like I have low blood pressure and my heart rate spikes to try to fix it and that'll make me pass out. So
Oh, Jesus.
the past few months I will go work with the horses, but I shit you not, every 5 to 10 minutes I get like that and just have to like lay down.
Oh, geez. Wow.
And then I
Yikes.
get back up and it's fine. I have a client who also has a heart problem and we're still training his colt completely with positive reinforcement and he understands and I just like we're gonna go through the winter because he's a military guy and he doesn't care. So I have to like stop every 10-20 minutes and like lay down.
Gotcha. Cool. How old is the colt? Is this a baby or like a 2-year-old?
Yeah, he is coming up on 2. He just got gelded a month ago. And but we started with him ungelded and he was just halter trained a little bit, but he was kind of going after his owner and stuff, pin
Ah,
ears
gotcha.
and all that. And he's almost ready to lunge. He saw the farrier. He did great. He learned to do
Oh,
his
cool.
feet and he knows how to stand and place somewhere and he will work with you through the fence. He's learned all his voice commands. He
Cool.
backs up like 10 feet when you get to the gate because he's been taught he needs to back the heck up.
Gotcha.
And his owner is just great with the clicker training and he works on it every single day.
Oh,
And I've been
cool.
doing a film series that'll be coming out on YouTube on that. Yeah,
Cool. Is this at his property or at your property?
that's at his property.
Okay.
And actually, my gelding disco might join him over there because he needs a friend. And so now that he's gelded, I may see it how disco does over there. And
I'm horse shopping right now for a resale project, and one of my requirements is I'm trying to find something. My guy, my 8-year-old 17 one hand Dutch harness horse, is very very playful and really would like a playmate. And none of the horses here are suitable. The one guy he goes out with is fine, but he's kind of stiff and he's not. He doesn't like to roughhouse. So I'm texting people. I'm like, does this horse like to play out in the field? Because my horse needs a friend. Yeah, no, I was
yeah,
asking about whether it was on property or off. Because one of the things I've gone to a few clicker training clinics, and clinics I find are tricky because the clinician is kind of on the spot to prove things sometimes, to prove that their methods work or prove what they know or show that they
that's
know what's
my fear
right.
with clinics.
So one of the first clinics that I went to for positive reinforcement, and this is somebody that we all know, so I won't mention her name. This was more than 10 years ago. She was younger then. But, somebody just asked a question. This was before saying somebody was a science denier got to be a cliche. But she responded that, oh, well, if you're denying this method, then you're denying science, which was the first hint that I got that there was something about positive reinforcement that was getting to be problematic, that you couldn't question anything without being so, well, science has proven this method. So if you're not going along with it, then I was like, that's kind of nuts. And as time has gone by, it's, people have learned that, it's not that the theory is right or wrong, but there are more details, perhaps. There are antecedent conditions and details that we didn't know or weren't thinking of, and things aren't necessarily a straight line, and all kinds of things that get in the way of us getting the perfect result that we are all kind of hope we can show. But yeah, it's tricky. As much as I love learning, I love the opportunity to do it online where you don't have that kind of pressure. At clinics, people are bringing their horse to a strange place, so the horse isn't going to behave the way it behaves at home. The horse is possibly going to be a lot more upset. Things are going to be a lot bigger deal. The likelihood that you're going to make any kind of change in 2 or 3 days is kind of small. It puts a lot of pressure on everybody to try to make something happen.
I mean, like, learning theory exists with negative reinforcement as well. And then a big question I've had and not gotten a good scientific answer for, but I've asked some trainers who have been behaviorists for over 20 years, and they just say, I don't know why, because it doesn't exactly follow the rules of science, but you can use both, or you may accidentally be using negative and positive reinforcement, or you can mix and muddle the two. And apparently it is done, and it is fine. And it still works. And we don't know why, because it shouldn't in the box of the 4 quadrants, right? But that's what I've been told when I went to some trainers and behaviorists and got consultants, because that was my question. And I was hearing a lot of back and forth on the internet, and no one could really answer my question other than it's wrong and you're denying science, basically. Right? And we need to be force-free and we need consent. And I agree with that on many levels, but it doesn't mean you can't mix the two, or you won't on accident, especially if you are inundated with using negative reinforcement and it's a language and your horse understands as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's very hard to tell also what the horse views something as.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's hard to tell what the horse's point of view is. And I've been very fascinated by the people doing the anatomical studies now, all these people doing necropsies on horses, to realize that a lot of it is not training problems. A lot of these horses have profound physical issues. And, when you talk to the vet and you take it to the clinic, they have kind of a pretty short list of things, very typical common things that they're looking for. Horses have all kinds of other problems. My body worker just did a 3-day dissection course, and that horse that they took apart, both of its elbows had been broken in the past at some point, which was something you would never look at. Rarely are you going to radiograph the horse's elbow. And they found all kinds of other problems with the horse. But what I see over and over again for these anatomists is just all kinds of stuff that either isn't going to come up on imagery or is just so freaking weird. Horses throwing the processes in their neck or in their pelvis, throwing off what looks like a rib, like extra bone growth.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things, you're not going to fix that with training. Like, these animals can be in pain and uncomfortable, and there could be nothing training wise that we could possibly do that's going to fix that. We can take feedback from the horse when they tell us, I don't want to do that. And that's helpful. I think it's very helpful when horses feel comfortable saying no. I took my horse to a new park yesterday. It was actually a really huge park. They've got a dam there, and there's a big river. It's about, well, for me, what I would consider big, it's about 30 foot wide and almost 3 foot deep in some parts. And my horse said, no, you may go first. So I did. I dismounted and I let him across this. I got very wet. It's about 50-degree day. I got cold. I was kind of hoping that on the way back, he might go through it. He said no. It was a very steep entryway to get down to it. So it's not a place where you even want to try pressuring the horse because
Uh-huh.
there's a
Nowhere to
45-degree hill behind you and
go.
it's not. So I'm like, all right, we're not
Get a
just
little
because
wet
again,
instead of all the way wet.
I guess I'll be getting off and I will be walking you through the stream again. And he's perfectly happy as long as I go first. He's like, that's fine. He pawed in the river and he thought that that was great. He was not going to do it with me on top of him. You know, maybe if I take him out there a few more times, I was all by myself on that particular day, maybe as a lead from a different horse. But he's a big chicken about the water, period. Or even like if I take him out to a field and the ground is a little squishy, he's like, oh, nope, I don't know. It could be quicksand. He says, I don't know. So he still has times. And honestly, I am grateful. You know, if he says he's not sure about something, he says no. I'm like, okay, you know, I put that on the list of things we have to work on over time. But I would rather he tells me no, and then we go back and try to build it up in steps than that I try to pressure him in. So yeah, I'm perfectly fine with them saying no, except as you mentioned earlier, when you have these situations where you have to, yes, the vet's coming and you have to do something.
I think it's very individual, and we have to kind of figure out our own ethics on that. And there is a trainer that I really love listening to. Her name's Becky Bold, and she uses
Okay.
positive and negative reinforcement.
All right.
And she also
Does
loves to
she,
talk about the science and the 4 quadrants and kind of argue with people who telling her that there's only one way to do it, you know. So I think she'd be really
okay,
fun to have
cool.
on.
Becky Bold, what's her business name? Does she
I
go
think
in
it's
under?
Becky Bold something horsemanship or something like that. I probably can get in touch with her, and she's on TikTok, and she has like made videos replying to my comments. So she definitely,
Okay.
I could probably get a hold of her.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to suck it up and go on TikTok.
You should. And plus we have an account, so you can use that if you want.
All right, I'll let you go then. Thanks again for joining us, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.